Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Mladen Juracek.
Well, guys, pleasure to have you on the show, Microprobes. Do you want to introduce yourself, your names and your roles and the company as well?
Yeah, my name is Martin Bak. Actually, I founded Microprobes in 1983 to provide kind of a unique electrode model that includes Parylene-C as an insulator, which was unique at that time and kind of operated on a part-time basis until 2004, at which time I'd written a grant in collaboration with Richard Anderson at Caltech and Phil Troik at IIT, develop an alternative multi-channel recording system to record long-term from the cortex. And so Microprobes actually was originally called Microprobe Inc., and then we kind of rebranded in 2008 as Microprobes for Life Science. And so we basically sell to neuroscientists and are currently in the process of also working our way into the clinical market also.
Interesting.
So I'd worked at NIH actually for about 30-some years until I transitioned to a full-time.
And so Microprobes was like a side project up until?
It was like a basement operation, actually. It was a basement operation up until about 2004. And then I retired from NIH.
Okay. And then you were still selling it, and then you got the grant, right? And then that kind of spurred you?
Yeah. In other words, I kind of needed the grant, which I was fortunately funded at SBIR1, in order to make the transition, from retiring and then operating a full-time business.
Wow. No rest for the wicked. So you were about to retire, and then you're thrown into the frenzy of entrepreneurship, something like that?
Yeah, well, I threw myself pretty much, but, in deciding to make that transition. And the other reason was that Phil Troik had become involved in the visual prostheses program, which I was involved in since the mid-'80s at NIH, in which we implanted actually one blind subject in 91 with 38 floating electrodes, individual floating electrodes, in order to determine whether or not we could evoke what they call phosphene, spots of light, within the visual field. And so previously, work had been done with surface electrodes, which had shown themselves through the work of Brindley and Dobell to not be effective with regard to either temporal resolution or spatial. And so we wanted to see if using microamp currents with small exposed electrodes could produce, phosphenes with a higher spatial and temporal resolution at much, much lower currents, probably 3 orders of magnitude less. And so we were successful in that implant. And so Phil Troik essentially took over the program in the late 90s. And so most of my desire to transition was to stay involved in the visual prostheses program, work with Phil Troik and others, to advance this. So
interesting. And how about you? What's your role in the company?
So I'm Nicolas Alba. I joined the company a few years ago, and I'm basically just the chief operating officer. So I've been helping out Marty just run the company and handle things when he's not there, and I've taken over a lot of the business development aspects of the company and some of the product development and technical support and things like that. Yeah.
So you weren't there from the absolute beginning, but you kind of now seen this post-grant time.
I used a lot of his products when I was a grad student.
Okay.
Yes, I was at University of Pittsburgh under Tracy Swee, and I got my doctorate working on basically electrode development, coating development for drug release and things like that. And I'd used a number of the floating microelectrodes arrays in my work, so I got to know the company very well. And after I graduated, I joined up, basically. Yeah.
And so, I'm actually interested in hearing from both of your guys' perspective, what's your guys' specialty, or why especially Microprobes?
But my interest in the company is it's kind of unique in what it does. And what it does is essentially using very, I would say, traditional but exceptionally skilled hand manufacturing methods to make completely customizable products. And, as a lot of other companies are moving towards, like automatic fabrication, mass fabrication, silicon, which tends to be kind of rigid, even though it offers some things that very specialized and unique in that, but one problem is that a lot of times, if for a project that does require flexibility, professors that are trying to do something that they just can't do with existing tools, it's really fun to be able to talk with a professor like that to figure out ways that we can use the skills that we have to solve whatever problem they have. If they're trying to access a difficult to reach target and do very specialized recordings there, it's a challenge, and it's a fun challenge to be able to figure out how we can adapt the products that we have to meet their need in a way that's quick and affordable. And I think
and so my experience at NIH, having worked within a lab with various groups and with various requirements in regards to instrumentation, but my fascination was in chronic electrode and acute electrode designs for different applications. And so, that kind of carried over with the company. And so I think Microprobes is very unique in the fact that each and every one of our electrode products are customizable. And we have design forms from everything from, what one would think a simple cuff electrode to, complex multi-electrode implants. And so I think that sets us apart in many respects from, what's available in the market, is the fact that, just inherent in the design provides the ability for scientists to tailor, their electrode arrays for their specific requirement. And so I think, we've been very successful in that, and, have provided a, very worthwhile niche, in the neuroscience, EFIS kind of community. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I mean, not everybody needs 1,000 electrodes, but how do you guys deal with quality, actually? I mean, if everything's essentially handmade, then how do you make sure that it's to a high enough standard?
You want to address that, Nicolas? That's fine.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just in the skill of our technicians and the ability of their technicians to, both monitor the quality of the material they're putting out, as well as, the skills we have to examine the products that we make. And of course, that's a big issue with hand manufactured tools, is, making sure, since we don't have that precision of automation, of making sure that our products are kind of to the exacting standards required. It takes a good bit of skills and training, and I think that's the key of it, is that a lot of our technicians have been with the company for over a decade. They've been very, very good at what they do, in a way that can't really be, it's something that, it was one of the main challenges that we have is in hiring and expansion, simply because there's no one out there that has the skills that are needed by the company. Everything that we do is internally trained. And so it requires very close relationships with our technicians, because, we kind of rely on them every day.
Yeah. And many of our technicians, some have been with us even before it went full time. I mean, we have some that have been there for 20, 21 years, 22 years. And then there's a next group that have been there, from when it full time for 13, 14 years. So, I think, we have a culture and an environment that, encourages people to stay, because, like Nicolas mentioned, it takes months, sometimes a year, for somebody to get really skilled at making a particular type of an electrode array. But as far as, the quality control aspect, just about everything that goes out the door goes through visual and in many cases electrochemical, testing. Some even with very sophisticated testings, such as what we call our wireless floating microelectrode arrays, and they go through extensive, monitoring of the fabrication as well as testing at the end, where we do even CV analysis, pulse and impedance spectroscopy on each electrode. So in which each electrode is characterized both physically and electrochemically. So entering into the clinical market, we've also realized that our quality management system is in a transition, and as a result of that, much of our even research products will probably, follow suit in regards to, probably even more stringent testing and monitoring, which is a very important aspect, like you said. I mean, even some of the, the silicon probes and the various other types of mass manufactured probes, even themselves, have to go through a certain degree of testing because there's a failure rate, even associated with mass production, right? And so kind of, realize, especially on our scale where things are handmade, that the importance of that.
Yeah.
And we work with our customers. I mean, if something goes through, and I think we have a really loyal customer base, and, if something does slip through or something like that, we're always there to work with the neuroscientists to make sure that what they've ordered is what they've been, sent.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I mean, we've been working on it with our lab too, and actually your guys' quality is quite good. And actually, I think other people now are seeking your guys' expertise in quality control, something like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages that we have is that a lot of times we're on the forefront of new techniques. Like when we identify that there's a certain trend in the research community and a need for certain types of electrodes, we always try to find ways to adapt what we have to meet that. And I think like our some of our peripheral nerve products are a good example of that, because it's a product that's been around for some time, but I think with kind of the concept of electromedicine coming to the fore, like a lot of labs are really starting to explore that with new vigor, especially with like cranial nerves, and especially those that are doing that in rodents. They require extremely specialized electrode products, cuffs that are much thinner than a human hair, that just weren't available on the market previously, especially for chronic applications where they need to have something they can implant and then monitor an animal, a behaving animal over time. They just did not have that tools. And so it's been our pleasure to develop that and to find success in that. Like I'd say our chronically implanted nerve cuffs are currently some of the best performing on the market, and as well as one of our fastest growing products. And it's always great to be able to give a lab that's desperate to find something that'll work for them, a tool that will actually allow them to do the research they need to do.
Yeah, and another way that we try to work with, ensure that, our products are going to be, achieve the, results that they're intended to, is that, when we do, introduce a new product, most of our designs and things like that are as a result of researchers actually coming to us. They have a problem and they need a way, an electrode system that'll solve that problem. And so what we always do, before introducing a new product, is to essentially beta test in at least several labs in order to get feedback. Because just about all engineers know, something that necessarily looks good on paper doesn't necessarily look good in nature. And so, we always do our best to make sure that any new variants of a product or a new product essentially undergoes significant beta testing, with researchers that we feel comfortable in working with and giving us the proper feedback. Mm-hmm. So we either know that it's suitable for distribution or needs, additional modifications to make it work.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's built up our reputation is the fact that we tend to do things the hard way. Like especially with a lot of our products, like say the peripheral nerves, cuffs. Like we've seen a lot of our competing businesses take the approach of making microfabricated components, things like that, where they can create like clips that may not have some optimal properties, but it's just the easiest way for them to do it. And on the other hand, like our approach has always been to figure out ways that we can use the skill of our technicians. And this, like for the cuffs, we have some technicians that are able to actually weave through components and sew through components that are, down below 20 microns in some cases, with extreme skill. We found this is good because a lot of times it allows us to make products in geometries that are built to last, I would say, and that's why I think like a lot of our products, like for instance, our floating microelectrode arrays, our brush arrays, our cuffs, have a reputation of being some of the greatest longevity products that are out there. Like our floating microelectrode arrays can function for over 7 years in primates. Like our brush arrays can get single unit recordings for over 2 years. And our cuff arrays have been shown to work for over 2 years, with great stable performance. And so we found a lot of customers that have tried, perhaps the simpler option eventually come to us just because we're the only ones that can make products that can do what they need.
So kind of the Rolex or Swiss watch approach.
Yeah, it's a great way to think of it.
Versus a quartz Casio.
Yeah, it's a great way to think of it.
Interesting. Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. So why is that actually an advantage? Like, why is a handmade approach better than like high technology, something like that?
Well, I'd say there's a business advantage because a lot of companies don't want to do it, And so we found a niche where there's not a lot of competition just because the skills and the training that are required, there's not a lot of companies that can do it, And so it's kind of put us in a nice position business-wise. And
I think that the environment that we've created, management's created, and, encourages people, to want to stay. Because again, it's not like they're learning a single task or something like that. We try to cross-train our technicians so they can, do more than just one kind of thing. And so it keeps things interesting also for them. But it takes a long, long time to train these people. And so they kind of go through an evolution of difficulty, in regards to the various aspects of assembly. There might be, for instance, like the wireless WFMA may employ like 8 different employees doing different steps, associated with the assembly of these devices. And so I think that it's bode well for the kind of environment we created, and the technicians feel creative, to a certain extent, because they're doing things really nobody else can do.
I'd say another strength that we have is the fact that, like, as a company, throughout the life of our company, we've really focused on electrodes. I've seen a lot of other companies that kind of expanded themselves into systems, and it's kind of put them all into different islands. One of our goals is to really support as much of the community as possible. And so we strive to make products that are kind of universal in compatibility. So we pride ourselves with the fact that we've got pretty close relationships with most of the DAC manufacturers out there, and that our products are made to be compatible with all of them. So if a customer comes to us with a specific system they like working with, or a specific head stage we like working with, that we can make a product that fits what they need, instead of them being locked into certain types of electrodes based on what system they have. And so it's given us a pretty close relationship with both customers as well as other, tool manufacturers and system manufacturers. We pride ourselves at that, just being the guys people go to when they need an interesting electrode.
Universality of everything. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because a lot of the people are moving towards the DAC systems, the data acquisition, because there seems to be more money in that or something, or maybe it's easier or something, or less regulation, maybe?
I don't know. I think, just maybe expanding themselves into a different revenue stream. I don't know. We kind of do it.
Yeah, interesting. And how big are you guys, and how have you been growing recently and possibly in the near future?
Well, we've always experienced a very steady growth. Because of the market we're in, at least currently, we've seen a 6-8% steady growth since its inception. And so I think that, the market that we're in, the neuroscience research community, I think we're probably a leader in electrode, being an electrode supplier. But the market is only so big, the majority of people in neuroscience are doing microbiology or doing, pharmaceutical kinds of work. And so there's a relatively small portion actually that are doing true electrophysiology that requires our type of electrode components. So I think that we've been satisfied with our growth. We probably have grown, even employee-wise. We probably doubled our number of production people in the last 2 years to take on our new products, as well as a substantial grant, brain initiative grant. So and one of the reasons we want to get into the clinical market as well is that it's probably more stable than the research market. It's not as much dependent upon the economy of countries. We sell all over the world. But again, this is, maybe a year down the road. We'll have to see. But I think we've matured ourselves both from a QMS standpoint and also just the way that our company now is run. We're ISO 9001, have been since 2008. That I think we're, prepared to kind of go into that market.
Sounds good. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to mention before we finish up?
I think I've got old stories you want to tell or anything like that. I guess.
I got a lot of old
it depends
stories,
on
but,
what you wanted the focus of the interview to be, like more on the business or like what. I guess what do you want to hear about?
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting stuff. I mean, it's kind of a showcase, but it's also kind of, telling the history, kind of both, the human side, but also the promotion side, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I could tell a lot of old stories about NIH, but where I loved working, actually, for 30-some years. Yeah, no, it's been an adventure. I mean, entrepreneurship, and especially in this field, has been a lot of fun. And one of the things I'll say, and this stems from my work at NIH and, working with a lot of postdocs and fellows and things like that came through. I think this field is blessed with having, really, I would say, neat people, down-to-earth people for the most part. They're fun to work with, and so it's just been fun working with the customers that we have and the people that are in this, this line of work. I think people, you have an innate satisfaction of knowing that, your work is going to someday, whether it's, next year or 50 years down the road, is going to help people, live better lives. And so, there's certainly that satisfaction that goes along with it. And so I think Nicolas feels the same way, that we're doing something that's going to help humanity live better lives. And so we could close with that, I guess.
That's an excellent way to close. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
For coming out.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.